Joe talk. She's our marketing manager and director, and then Tree's not going to be able to join us till about 3:30. So, but anyway, go ahead, Joe. I'll mute my side.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joe with 214 Alpha. Sorry. I didn't know if that was mine on my end or yours. Just kind of interested to find out, what Anarchapulco is all about. And after talking with Michael, it's a pretty interesting concept and could actually be, the first time that applied anarchy actually comes into existence. So it's pretty neat little group that you guys have here.
Yeah, it is quite an opportunity, and the 214 Alpha Group have a model of an application that is effectively like a 7-part application that covers a bunch of different areas, and so what we're talking with them about is trying a couple pilot projects, one for the Anarchapulco community and one for the Chiran community potentially. And so I'm hoping to have somebody from Chiran here as well. But Colin, are you able to talk? Can you introduce yourself?
Hey, Michael, can you hear me?
Yeah, there you are.
Cool. Excellent. Yeah, I ended up at this awesome little cafe in a little town called Capon Bridge in West Virginia. And yeah, appreciate the opportunity to connect. I guess I'm mainly speaking on behalf of shopcity.com, which is a venture that I started almost 20 years ago now, dedicated to creating strong local economies and building up resilience within local economies and local communities. Also the founder of Presearch, which is a decentralized search engine, and attended Anarchapulco last year, and excited to get back there this year. And yeah, I believe this is really one of the kind of leading communities of free thinkers in the world, and it's really excited just to be a part of it and do whatever we can to support what's happening there locally and on a global basis.
Thanks, Colin. Yeah, one of the things that I think Shop City is they've actually got a working model. It's called Shop Midland. It's a little town in northern Canada or northern Ontario, and they're actually demonstrating how how to build a local model with a local like business search, and it works into kind of his Presearch model as well as like a distributed global search engine, but the locals contribute to their information to their local environment, and the more you learn about it, the more exciting you get, because as local businesses kind of power and local consumers power building a local marketplace, you can start to add in all the other things, all the cultural things, the events and all that kind of stuff, and the locals become responsible for the information that gets out to the rest of the world. And so I think it's an excellent model, and I think it's something that we can if we can incorporate that into what we're trying to do here, it's just going to be that much more powerful. And I do feel that like the universe conspires to to help people get what they want if you end up helping enough people to get what they want. And I think we have that opportunity. We've also got Joe Baker here, and Joe's got a kind of interesting concept. He's got the Remedy Coin. Joe, you want to talk a little bit about your Remedy Coin idea and some of the other things that you're doing as far as the community?
Is there anyone else that can go first?
Okay, well, we'll hold off there. We got Michael Bach. Michael, you want to introduce yourself?
All right. Sorry, it's my first time using this app. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, so my name is Michael, and I've been living in Acapulco for around 20 years now. So basically, I've been working as an entrepreneur for maybe 25 years or so. So yeah, I haven't been to a lot of the Acapulco meetings and stuff like that, but I am interested in getting maybe a little bit more integrated. I've been working a lot with Jeff Berwick when he arrived here. I helped him start the new Anarchapulco, set up Anarchast and all this stuff, and I still do stuff for him. So yeah, I'm just interested in connecting a little bit and see where it can lead.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Yeah, and you got a couple websites that you do stuff. What you want to let people know what those are?
I have a whole bunch. I do mexresorts.com, which is a travel site. I have a lot of different websites like that where I earn money online. Besides that, I have clients like Jeff and stuff like that. But yeah, I can do website, online promotions, and this kind of stuff pretty easily. So I think that's my main thing right now. I'm sorry, I'm walking a little bit around here. I'm with my kid alone today.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm gonna put you back on mute, and then let's see. So, Joe, are you ready yet, or we can go to? Does anybody else want to introduce themselves? I'm not sure who T. Prue is.
Hi, this is Joe.
Hey, Joe.
How do I get my video? Is my video up? Great, thank you. Let's see, here in Acapulco. Been here going on, it'll be 2 years, January 1st. So I'm working on a project called remedycoin.com. Basically, the idea is to create tokens that allow people to trade kind of an honorary thing, like a feather, right? You give someone a feather for doing a good work. So the idea is to reward good works. And that way you create a new kind of money system. So we figure the best form of charity the highest form might be forgiveness. So I'm working on a mechanism to securitize an act of forgiveness. And it of specific interest to the anarchy community, it becomes its own sort of justice system. So if we consider that the police did something that we feel is wrong, well, we can, according to our value system, we can forgive them. And they might not like it being forgiven, but there's not a hell of a lot they can do about it. There's no law against forgiving somebody. So we can actually create securities that there are no regulations for, because it's the resolution of a conflict. Let's see, other things I do are healing. I do frequency healing with tuning forks and stuff like that, and I can do it remotely. Even have these bags of ozone gas that I brought, and I can imagine that these are overlaying your body, or like in your body, right? So that's kind of experimental stuff I'm working on. Sure appreciate all that, Mike, that all that you're doing here for the community, focusing on having these meetings. I'm working on getting this set up in the meeting room here, so we'll have Zoom up on the screen, and I brought a little microphone along to get that going. But
Okay.
Thanks.
We also have Aaron here. Aaron, do you want to introduce yourself? I'm guessing this is Aaron. Oh, it says he's getting ready to leave. All right. Well, I'll just. Aaron is he's kind of his background is SEO, and he does quite a few website management type things, but he's also kind of put together a kind of our own community version of like a Facebook application we can kind of communicate with each other. And we're still kind of in the beta stage of putting that thing together, but it's something else that we could, you know, potentially integrate into a larger system. Still waiting on Dale to show up, and so just to give you a little bit of an idea of Dale Brown and why I think he's important, and you know, why I think you know, everybody for the community in regards to like his understanding of how to bring security, and not only how security, you know, like just taking care of danger and take care of you know, the potential for robberies and violent crimes and that kind of thing, but it's also about how you deliver prosperity, you know, because one of the basic needs that we have is building you know, is in building a community, is building a place that people feel safe. And certainly when you have safety, commerce is one of the first things that you know, people start to do. They start to interact with each other. They start to understand what everybody, you know, what kind of valuable things they can do for each other. And Dale has really demonstrated this in Detroit. You know, his story, and I'm sure I'd be glad they'll I'm going to really be loving him to tell the story, but you know, he has really demonstrated over the past 20 years how you know, like people taking responsibility for their own security and essentially hiring him as their you know, their security apparatus, and then him going out into the community and getting volunteers and getting people in those neighborhoods and stuff to you know, to participate in taking responsibility for their community's safety and security. Is how things, you know, and it's not just like the neighborhood watch and those kind of things. Of course those things are useful, but it's also like de-escalation and how teaching individuals how to deal with kind of threatening situations. And it is like one of these, I think it's one of these examples, and I think Acapulco is also a perfect example of this, of like when you get the chance to take on your own authority and be your own authority and actually, you know, take on the responsibility for yourself. There is an empowerment that comes along with that, that is, you know, the exemplifies freedom. And you know, I think Dale has explained to me a particular situation. Let's say, for example, there's somebody that looks threatening that's approaching you, and maybe he's got his hand in his pocket or something like that. You don't know if he's got a knife or a gun, and he's starting to approach you. Well, the, you know, general response to that is run for your life. But his suggestion is actually step towards that individual and extend your hand like you want to shake his hand. And that's you know, that's obviously not something that most people are going to do. But what that does is, it, number one, it's your preparation. You've prepared yourself for that situation, and you thought about it, and you've taken something that you know, otherwise most people aren't prepared for. And then on top of that, that's like the last thing that like somebody that's a thug is going to expect from somebody, for that person to start to approach them and then to go and do in a friendly manner. It offers them an opportunity to make a choice, because then they either have, you know, because now they either have to pull their gun out or pull their knife out now, or they've got to like let go of their knife and actually shake your hand. And in 99.9% of the cases, they're going to choose the thing that's better for them. And so this is another thing that Dale talks about, is like creating opportunities for people to do the right thing, you know, and see like how things benefit themselves. you know, and how situations can benefit themselves. Well, I don't know what the situation is with Dale, but you know, I'm thinking that maybe we should just go into kind of plan B here and start kind of a discussion about some things that you know, I wanted to do in hour 2 and 3, but since Dale isn't showing up, we're just going to have to make some adjustments.
Do we have an offline way of contacting him just to see if he's delayed? Like a phone number?
I sent him a message. I haven't got a response, so I'm a little bit concerned. I sent him a message yesterday, and he responded, you know, that he acknowledged that this was the time. So I'm not exactly sure what the problem is. And I did, you know, I've talked to him on 2 different occasions on Zoom, so I know he knows how to use this stuff and all that good thing. But I don't know. Kent, you wanna go into a little bit more in depth about what 214 Alpha's concept is and how it could benefit a community?
Yeah, I could do that. We were hoping to have Trudy talk it through because I just love listening to Trudy talk about it. She's not going to be around for another couple hours, so I might have to just jump into it. You know, I have a brief presentation, which I guess I could show, but it's sometimes better just to sort of talk about it. Actually, you know, give me a moment here and I can here, just bear with me for a second. Let me, because I do have a graphic that might help, but I will talk about it. As mentioned, you know, I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with the BitNation vision, but it's to create decentralized governance on the public blockchain. So, and I was originally hired to build the reputation economy, actually design the reputation AI they called Lucy. And then in talking to Suzanne, you know, my background is engineering management and product management for, you know, technology. So I was telling her, you know, you've got 200,000 lines of code, but none of it's usable because it's all volunteer code. Nobody has any idea what the other code is, right? So if you're going to need a product for your ICO, you're going to need an engineering team. And so, so she funded the creation of an engineering team, and from that we created the Pangea product. And once we started building it, I worked really hard to start talking to prospective communities. Because in my experience, that's the only way you can get people to adopt software. You have to work with the actual people who would use it. And it's really just because, you know, you might have we software developers might have a hypothesis about what people need, but until you actually get out into the trenches, you're not going to know anything, right? It's just kind of, I'm interested in talking to Colin offline, is like, because he probably knows that, right? It sounds like you begin with a vision, but then, you know, until you work with the community, you might not exactly know if that hypothesis is correct. And so, you know, while we were developing the Pangea product, had an opportunity to talk to a lot of really interesting communities and found, I mean, learned a lot of stuff. Like, for instance, none of them want governance. It's like, they might say that, but that's not really what they want. What they want is the ability to have their own economy, right? Which seems obvious, you know, but that's sort of like the first step of agency, is just to have like an economy, you know? So that was an interesting realization, is that, you know, they don't want to jump right into their own software version of the European Union with complex governance models. What they really want is just, you know, they want to be able to assert their agency and their dominion, sovereignty, I guess, within the context of a closed community. So, so yeah, that was what made me emphasize the that's what made me emphasize the economic aspect of Pangea when we were building it, and you know, from there, that actually evolved into some really interesting conversations about how that might actually be adopted. And you know, that was really great because it implied a certain sequencing, if you will. Like, you know, the first step is you have to do X, and then the second step you have to do Y. You know, there's like this, and it was sort of from that we came up with this, what we call the 7 pre-integrated functions of our platform. And I'll talk through it in a second. I need to put together this. I'm trying to talk while finding an image, which is, I think it's going to give me here we go. Like, doing 2 things at once is not sometimes the easiest. All right, here we go. So if I if I present, is that going to work? That's not going to work. Hang on a second, because I need to get into Zoom here. Share, bear with me here. There you go. Okay, can you guys see this okay?
Yeah, we're seeing it fine.
Okay, so I'm going to pause my washing machine because it's crazy loud and it's super annoying to me at the present. So as I'd mentioned, our office is also my laundry room. So so we came up with this idea of having 7 pre-integrated functions, because as we started talking to communities, like a really good example is the Rohingya of Myanmar. You guys are probably familiar with their case, but they had been attracted to there's a guy named Mohammed Noor who represents the Rohingya, and in Myanmar, formerly Burma, the government had changed their definition of what constitutes an acknowledged minority group, and they had explicitly, well, not, I mean, basically they excluded the Rohingya. So suddenly, they were stateless people within the country, and it stimulated a lot of genocide, right? People were killing them and taking their land and the whole deal. So they left and they went to Saudi Arabia and Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, and Bangladesh. And so, Mohammed's in Kuala Lumpur, and he'd been putting together the Rohingya project, which is to basically create their own state, if you will. And it's actually done some great work. But anyway, as you listen to what he's trying to do, I mean, what their first use case is really great. The first use case is, we need to create crowdsource funding so the Rohingya can fund projects by the Rohingya for the Rohingya, which seems really simple, but there's some complications to that. Like, for instance, and this kind of gets to this graphic I'm showing, the first problem they had was digital identity, actually. If they're going to be a virtual nation which spans borders, identity turns into a real issue. Like, as he described it, in Bangladesh, not in Bangladesh, excuse me, in Malaysia, the government will provide a subsidy for the refugees of the Rohingya, genocide. And so what they have is a lot of Bangladeshis who claim they're Rohingya, and then it causes a lot of conflict within their community. And so what they need to do is to verify if somebody is actually a Rohingya. So that ended up, not just having a digital identity, but also identity verification. So that was sort of the first step. And they were working on a solution to do that. And then once they had built upon that, once they were able to define, well, what constitutes our community and then what's outside that community, it's, creating a basic firewall from fraud, if you will. Then they needed to be able to communicate, and for them it's basically chats. They want to use Signal or Telegram or whatever else, and then once they've built that, they want to do some form of commerce, and the first expression of commerce is actually technically banking. It's microcredit loan. So as you can see, I've actually just gone through 4 of the 7 functions, and what they were doing was cobbling together a lot of different technologies to do this. And so I use that example because in microcosm, that's what's happening with every community we encountered. They needed to build a virtual infrastructure that enabled them to define their dominion, their sphere, if you will. And so, what we realized is that one of the first benefits we can provide is just pre-integrating that stuff, because, a lot of people don't have the background on creating and maintaining a number of software integrations, which is actually a lot of work. It takes a ton of work. And you guys may or may not be aware of this, Colin and some of the others probably are, but software is actually kind of expensive in the form of maintenance. It's about 75 or 80% if you're lucky. Usually closer to 90% of your cost is maintenance. It's keeping it updated because there's patches, making sure that you're addressing defects as the products continue to evolve in terms of their use, all that other stuff. Maintenance ends up being a really big cost, and a lot of people don't recognize that. So, they'll start cobbling together different technologies, and then it turns into kind of an unanticipated death by 1,000 cuts in terms of the maintenance. And so the first thing that we wanted to do was really say, look, we're just going to manage these pre-integrations. Like, you don't have to. We'll deliver all of these things through a single user interface, so you don't have to cobble together all that different stuff. At the same time, we've got to be holistic. You can't assume that other people don't already have a solution. Like, we've talked about Pompeii, and geez, the remedy coin is goddamn brilliant as far as I can tell. It actually dovetails with our reputation thing. So, there's 2 sides of this, right? So anyway, I'll talk through all these things. digital identity is, like I said, it's not just, there is a digital identity. If you have a mobile device, you have a digital identity, but there's also identity verification, which, can be sophisticated. My background is information security, and I managed projects that were, in my role before BitNation up until 2017, I was managing device fingerprinting and machine learning algorithms for identifying fake profiles and fraud behaviors. And it was for a company called iOvation, which does it for Amazon, Citibank, and a bunch of others. So we were actively monitoring over just under 4 billion devices every day. So it's vast scale, huge, machine learning architecture. And we're not talking about use cases like this. Like, what we're talking about are communities that probably have 20 people at first and might scale up to a few hundred, and then it'll probably split out into a smaller group that is cooperating with the first group, right? So in that context, we can do some pretty sophisticated digital identity that doesn't need to be like a retinal eye scan or some weird thing. Like, for instance, it could be as simple as this. Like, I could apply to be a member of the Anarchapulco, 24/7, 365 community. And I might do so by saying, hey, I went to Anarchapulco 2017. I actually stayed at an Airbnb that overlooked the harbor. There's a pizza place 2 blocks down, and there's a family that works there. I mean, just basically by sharing knowledge that can only be gained by having been there, and maybe really some, second factors of authentication based on knowledge that could only been gained through face-to-face. Like, that's actually a really secure form of identity verification that it leverages social interaction more than some weird technology. So anyway, that's for us as digital identity. The second one is communication. We use a chat-based communication. So that would be, what we consider private and public chat, which turns into, person-to-person messages or multi-user messages. And it's, it's a mobile platform. The third one is commerce. And so for us, we're a blockchain-based solution, and we use a private blockchain for the reasons I'd stated before, not merely because it's a lot cheaper and it's a lot faster, but it's also, man, it's data sovereignty, right? Like, what we found out first and foremost is that none of the customers that we talked to at BitNation wanted their transactions open for reverse engineering by nation states. They wanted it on a private blockchain. So, what we facilitate, actually, the cool thing about having a private blockchain is that it actually allows us to use smart contracts to, facilitate buy, sell, trade/barter. Trade and barter is an amazing and powerful one that is completely overlooked all the time. It's weird to me because there's so much wealth in a community, but it's, buy, sell, trade/barter, payment plans, subscriptions. There's a lot of really sophisticated stuff that could be made available through the smart contracts within the commerce. And for us, we call that marketplace. And so our marketplace offering has, inventory and inventory management, stuff like that. Then there's, and this is again why I'd love to talk to Colin, because, it's an example of the sort of thing he's doing, right? The banking is, it's not just a regular wallet, but there's also a multi-sig wallet. And then there's the functions associated with banking, crowdsource funding, microcredit loans, that sort of thing. We actually just added about 3 weeks ago, we added the ability to hold a digital asset, such as a deed or title, which could be used as collateral to help fund projects within a discrete community. So that was the intention for it, is that we have a guy we're speaking with who owns a bunch of property about 100 miles north of Toronto, and he is wanting to donate it to the indigenous people in that region. And so what he wants to do is hold the deed as a collateral, and then there will be certain terms that'll get to governance in a second. But not just giving him the land, but giving him the land in the context of stewardship of the land. It's that not ownership, but acting as stewards of the land on behalf of the mother, or whatever definition they have. So anyway, that gets into the transitions into reputation. Like I said, I was originally hired to design the reputation economy for BitNation, but the way I went about doing it was, first off, I just I spent a decade in global manufacturing, and I know a lot about Lean Six Sigma and Deming's models and all that. So it's from the perspective of, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So by putting statistical process controls in place, it enables a community to have really world-class sophistication in terms of measuring their transactions without it being sold out to some huge company, right? But they added a couple of other dimensions to this, and this is what it would be cool to talk to Joe about, is that I added a dimension. Actually, what I did is I made the reputation token monetizable. So within the going back to banking for a second, we're not just talking about like Ethereum or Bitcoin. We're talking about a community having their own tokens, and that can be confusing for some people. But when I talk to people, I don't even talk about crypto or tokens. I talk about if you go to Starbucks and you have the Starbucks app, and you put $10 on the Starbucks app, that is basically turning into a non-redeemable token, if you will, that can only be spent with Starbucks. So I'm basically talking about that. But you can do some really cool stuff with that, because if you can facilitate that within a community, you've put a stop to the fiscal leakage that normally occurs, where money gets drained off to Visa or PayPal or whatever else. It keeps it within the community, and that has a dramatic effect in terms of elevating the valuation of that closed economy. And so, anyway, that's, let's say that there's a narco bucks or whatever. It doesn't matter to me what it is. But anyway, getting over into the reputation side, one of the design constraints for designing the reputation economy is that it was a monetizable asset. And what it was is that it was paying people for accrued reputation. This is really something that's synergistic with what Joe was saying. And the reason for it originally is that it actually ironically removes one of the biggest reasons why people engage in fraud using fake accounts. Is that, normally they'll create a bunch of fake accounts, or what are usually called Sybils, and they'll manipulate the perception of a reputation through, fake reviews and that sort of thing. But here's the thing, you can't get paid in reputation more than what you had to spend for the transaction in the first place, which eliminates the ROI right out of the gate. So somebody will still maybe try to do it to hurt the perception in terms of optics, but it still costs them money to do it, right? But anyway, once we added that actually opened up a lot of really interesting potential. And so I added 2 dimensions of reputation to our economy, above and beyond the statistical process controls that I was talking about from manufacturing. And one of them I call selvage, which is a term that comes from, the domain of weaving, and it was by intention, it's from there. And so the idea is that if somebody can innovate a way to reduce the rates of conflict and arbitration, we pay them for the difference, because it helps us optimize our system. And so in practice, this actually really dovetails what Joe was talking about, is, most reputation systems in the domain, public domain, has a lot to do with your worthiness as a consumer. But let's face it, most people are inherently trustworthy, and they have deviations from that sometimes, but you should still have the ability to forgive, right? And from that dynamic, you could actually, imagine somebody within a community using the restorative justice methodology. That actually would be something that would trigger a positive monetization of the selvage token relative to using attorneys to fight it out into perpetuity, right? So that creates a reward for people to end things in a mutually beneficial and peaceful manner. And so in this case, what was you wanted the guy to talk about? What was his name? The guy that was going to talk about in Detroit. Like, basically, this creates the basis, Dale, this creates the basis of that being a cash positive function, is teaching people, don't act like a victim if you think you're going to get victimized. Go up and just talk to them. And in my experience, that actually works. I'm not a big guy, but I'm not a victim, right? And it doesn't mean I'm going to walk around with a gun. It just means I'm going to look people in the eye and say, hey, and they normally don't expect it. It totally works, by the way. So, so anyway, the second one was the WEF token. The WEF token is again, it's from weaving, and if you can, the name is from the domain of weaving, but if you can elevate the rates of reputation for others, we pay you for that as well. And it's because you are, bringing back to the community. So anyway, that's the reputation economy. Getting over into arbitration, because there's going to be conflict. The platform also has built-in arbitration. And the methodology we are using is actually something we got from one of our partners. It's an indigenous woman out of the Washington area, and it's private administrative process using notary, and it's based in common law precedent, which goes back to the Roman era. And so it's admissible in every jurisdiction on earth because it predates, it transcends statutory law. And she knows this because she fought the U.S. government about an indigenous land claim and won based on the common law precedent. So what's cool about it is that you put all these things together, people have an incentive, both in terms of money and reputation, to solve problems between themselves and not take it to courts and don't take it to lawyers. And look, I like lawyers, don't get me wrong, right? But what we don't want is a situation where people are monetized. The current structure monetizes a perpetuation of conflict through attorneys, and that's not workable. So the final thing is self-governance. Normally, when people talk about governance, they talk about, voting structures and all that other stuff. But in the context of our platform, almost all of it is invisible. It's policies and procedures, roles and responsibilities, access and permissions. That's actually corporate governance. That's actually how governance works in the context of an economy. And so that's the most of what you see is actually unseen. It's that there's a certain role that somebody has, and that actually affords them a certain access, certain permissions, and certain policies. And then there's a layer above that. Yeah, somebody might decide to step up and say, I will aspire to be a steward of the community's safe water, and I will deliver upon these quantitative goals over the next 6 fiscal quarters, whatever. And if they do it, cool. If they don't, then they get replaced. It's just that simple. So anyway, those are the 7 pre-integrated functions. But in full disclosure, we are we're still a startup. We only started in October. The BitNation ICO flamed out last summer. We restructured in October, got going. We got our first customer in January. So we're building the platform. So what you can put your hands on are digital identity, communication, commerce, banking, and some governance. We're still building the reputation and arbitration components. So when we talk to communities, we talk very explicitly about a pilot project with beta software, just to be completely open about it. So anyway, with that, I can stop if there's any questions, and I apologize for monologuing a bit, but I do talk about this a lot, so.
Yeah, well, appreciate all that, Kent. And, just to let everybody know, we had a few new people come in. What we're doing, we're kind of flying by the seat of our pants and adjusting to the situation. Dale has not shown up yet, so we're kind of changing the plan a little bit here on what we're going to be doing. But Kieran Pearson has shown up, and so I just want to acknowledge that Kieran is here. Kieran is kind of our food security guy for today, but he's got a lot of different aspects. And I don't know, Kieran, you want to introduce yourself real quick? I should say Kyron. Oh, okay.
Kieran, right?
Kyron.
Kyron?
Can you hear us, Kyron? All right. Well, I guess we'll get back to Kyron. Well, another element of this is, the focus is on security. And so there's a lot of different areas, and, what you talked about, Kent, in regard to, communication, governance, all these kind of things, all these areas, there are elements that could be considered security in nature. So like if people are unable to communicate with each other, that's an area and an element that generally leads to conflict and misunderstanding is when communications break down, right? And so like creating and establishing a network that is very resilient and potentially has alternatives is something that is really important. And one of the things that Shop City has done with their Shop Midland is they've kind of created almost like a little mesh network within the small town, and provided like free Wi-Fi for people that are in town to access the internet. Of course,
That's
when
awesome.
they access the internet, they immediately access Shop Midland, and so that's another reason for the businesses to be participating. But I don't know, Colin, could you chime in there a little on that particular part of it? We'll talk about communications a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Michael. And yeah, really interesting to hear Kent speak. Definitely sounds like we need to have some further conversations. Particularly interesting when you said something about somebody 100 miles north of Toronto, because that's exactly where we are physically as well. So as you said, Michael, the universe appears to be conspiring, and I think that's just another example of that. But yeah, so we're actually just using it's an off-the-shelf open source system called CloudTrax, TRAX. You can check that out. It's a mesh network architecture It enables you to basically, leverage different internet connections and then a series of boosters. And so we've got a building right in the heart of downtown Midland that we call the local hub. It's an ex-bank, and we've got a couple of antennas up on the roof kind of broadcasting internet signals north and south. And then we have a series of boosters or repeaters all over the downtown area, in particular the places where people access internet, mainly internet cafes and or sorry, not internet cafes, but cafes and other co-working type places. And yeah, it's been really successful. The actual cost of implementation is pretty low. I mean, you need at least one high quality internet connection, or you can have people sharing a portion of a number of different internet connections. Hardware itself to cover an area that's about let's call it 6 kind of town blocks, not city blocks. Looking at like $2,500, it's nothing extreme in the cost. Biggest challenge that we've had actually is more on filtering content that could cause the internet connection to be blocked. ISPs generally frown on people running malware and sending spam emails and those types of things. We also have minor liability concerns around accessing other content, like child pornography and whatnot. So we have used a service called Umbrella that is basically a content filtering system that just works at the DNS level, and is a way basically to stop that type of potentially detrimental access to the network from causing issues to the broader network. But yeah, it's been well received. A big part of it is really about marketing. Same with kind of everything that we've done. And so as Michael said, you access it, and it basically has a captive portal, which is what they call the software that will launch a website automatically when you access the network for the first time. I believe we have it set so that you can use the network for like 3 hours, and then after that it forces you to kind of go through the captive portal again. But it's a big opportunity to bring awareness to our local brands. So we've got the shopmidland.com site, and so that is a significant way that people actually find out about and access the site. And because it's got all this locally relevant content, and it's kind of obvious what it is, it doesn't just pop up and then people click out of it. They actually will pop it up and use it. As well, from a marketing standpoint, we've set up the SSID for the network to just free Wi-Fi, so it's pretty obvious to anybody who just sees it pop up on their device what it is, and that definitely breeds usage. And then we have partnered with the Downtown Business Improvement Association, which represents about 150 or so businesses, and basically we have a platform that's built into the Shop City system that enables different associations or business groups or nonprofits to select from our master overall database whichever businesses are their members. And then we've got a system that enables those different entities to build a custom website on their own domain that then has a business directory and a mapping system and newsfeed updates, a bunch of other stuff from all of their member businesses. And so we partnered with the BIA. We provided them with the software. They then have the incentive to use and promote the system. Their members get kind of double access essentially for their efforts, so they can post an update into Shop Midland and it automatically goes onto the BIA website. And so part of that partnership was to have the BIA market the free Wi-Fi systems. So we've got these window stickers that basically go on all the different business windows. You know, there's kind of a general shopmidland.com support your community type window sticker, but then we've also got one that you know, specifically has like a Wi-Fi logo and talks about how the, you know, free Wi-Fi is provided by the BIA and shopmidland.com. And so you know, there's lots of ways for people to find out about things, and that has led to other partnerships as well with the municipal government and Chamber of Commerce and other organizations, where we've basically got this one kind of harmonized database that is powering the business presences across all these different organizations. So yeah, it's kind of trying to figure out how to, you know, build this ecosystem where you are providing value to all the different stakeholders. You're getting it actually out into the community so that it's being utilized and is therefore creating value for the businesses. And then there's really kind of the revenue component to it, which is extremely important. And that's where we've done pretty well. Shopmidland.com generates about $230,000 a year currently, with one salesperson in a community of 17,500 people. And we feel that there's probably more like $500,000 to $750,000 in total revenue potential, you know, as we just continue to go deeper. So if you've got that economic sustainability to a model as well, then that enables you to do some really creative things, like buy, you know, a building in the downtown area that just provides you with kind of a landmark marketing presence and a place that you can you know, hold networking meetings or bring people from the community. So it's all these kinds of things, just trying to figure out how to make them work harmoniously. And as Kent said, you know, it's about pilot projects. We currently view each community that we're in as a pilot project. Midland is the most developed, but there's about 50 different cities that are up and running now with different entrepreneurs who are executing, you know, different stages of the model in their communities. And really, ultimately, it's about local pride and instilling and reinforcing that local pride, so that people care about where they are, and then they care about all the ancillary kind of issues and opportunities that go along with that. So yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Okay.
Oh, that's fantastic. I shared in the chat a link to Althea Mesh, which is another project. And I had got to know them because one of the women that's working with them was from the Portland area, and they had done a deployment in Colombia. And when we were building the Pangea platform, it was our intention to build a mesh compatible mobile platform. What we found is that there's a dramatic immaturity of the software stacks, and we could do it, but we didn't have the budget to build, for instance, libp2p. You could look it up. It's a fabulous library. We found, though, that it was largely proof of concept code. And so if we were going to need it, we were going to use it, I needed to staff a team to maintain it, and I didn't have the budget, right? So like within our software is the ability to use the mesh, at least at a rudimentary level, but we found that a lot of the libraries aren't sufficiently mature. So we would need a good pilot to actually evolve that technology. But the mesh has dramatic potential. Actually, the Althea one, probably the one that you sent as well, but the Althea one is that when people get a router, you basically pay crypto for expedited path through the mesh network, which is kind of kick-ass actually. So, you know, that ends up being like your quality of service based on certain policies that you're paid for. So people can turn their Althea Wi-Fi router into a profit center if they wanted, right? But there's another dimension to security I wanted to mention that is pretty important, is what we also ran into repeatedly is there's those who will disingenuously social engineer their way into the community, and then they use it to publish illegal content, and then they're doing that to try to demean the name of the community, right? So that ends up being something you've probably run into before, but we also run into that as well. So we have to really rely on, you know, some good security measures just so you don't get, you know, I don't know if they're a nation state actor or they're just a troll who wants to come in and make it look like your community is publishing child porn or something, right? So so that is a consideration, and it happens a lot actually. It's a little annoying, but what are you going to do? So
yeah, you know, I do want to I'm going to try and keep a few things housekeeping wise. I'm trying to keep an eye on a few different things here. So, you know, pardon my interruption on a regular basis. I want to answer one of the chat questions that Michael brought up, but I also want to address, you know, something that Kent said in regard to, like, the platform that he's talking about is something that is on a kind of need basis, and so we can. I want to make it sure that everybody understands that this is kind of a thing that it offers us the opportunity to, like, fit in what fits for us. And being that, you know, we're focusing this on two different communities, Turan being one, and the Acapulco, Anarchapulco community being two, is that what works for us and what works for the participants is what we're going to use. And so, like, in the case of, like, Turan, for example, a community that you know, is pretty much unified and is a small town kind of situation. Many of the things that they might need initially are things like, you know, maybe like a Kiva model where people outside, anarchists that want to support that type of community can create like a loan mechanism to, like, aid little and small businesses to and entrepreneurs to develop economic engines within their community that can, you know, that can really demonstrate, you know, the nature of the situation that they have, the opportunity that they have. And so us collaborating with them might be a little bit different than what is the situation in Acapulco, where the shop city model that Colin is you know, has kind of outlined is something that really could work for Acapulco. You know, being that most of the traffic and most of the people are in a very, you know, small area for the most part in the bay along the Costera, and then the Diamante area. But both of those areas are effectively, you know, relatively small to the larger community. And so, like, businesses that could participate in creating a mesh network in that area could really potentially create a really effective business model. But that, you know, that could still integrate with the 214 alpha concept for the community. And you know, that could be the kind of the economic development area that we kind of utilize to really kind of power the whole, you know, the incentivize the community and you know, creating the opportunity. Ken from Pompey is probably going to join us sometime soon, and you know, Pompey is a point of sale system, and he is you know, he's really developed some contacts in the city and some of the businesses to accept cryptocurrency. But this is one of the areas where kind of integrating, you know, several different people's efforts together could really bear a lot more fruit. And so, like, kind of like integrating what Ken is doing with Pompey with what Colin is doing in Shop City could potentially have that circumstance where they see the usefulness of creating their own token. And so, you know, all those together, Ken's work, and Colin's work coming together to solve different problems really helps all three. And so I just wanted to point that out. So get back to what Michael had said in regard to my example about Dale Brown and like, you know, having approaching somebody in the street, you know, that's threatening. He said that you know, maybe that's not such a good idea in Acapulco. You know, I'm not saying that that's necessarily the best model in regard to a particular situation. I'm just saying that there's a way to go about you know, creating or evaluating situations and preparing yourself for situations that can occur. And so like if you create a community that's got a bunch of people that are mindful and prepared and have done some reflective thinking on particular situations that could be threatening, could be just like robberies or stuff like that. There are thoughtful ways to go about deterring crime. And if the community works together, those solutions work. Okay, I'm going to check the chat. Does anybody have any comments? I see Paul Chermak is joined us. He's from Tehran. Paul, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm not sure if you can hear me at the moment.
Ah, there you are. There you are.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm locked out of my office. I wasn't able to obtain my key. I loaned it to someone, and I wasn't able to track that person down. So I'm out in the street trying to listen over the car noise. But yeah, sorry guys, but I did make it in the end.
Paul, you just want to just tell us a little bit about you and your situation in Tehran?
Yeah, sure. Well, I've been here just over 5 months, and yeah, I basically came here because I was at Anarchapulco, and there were about 10 representatives from Tehran, one in particular who spoke on the stage, and the others who just introduced themselves briefly. But they welcomed all of us to come and feel at home in their town. And I was actually on a journey to find a place to live. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Great, because sometimes I get some feedback. I might try putting my headphone in, it might make it better anyway. Basically, I came here, and within 2 days, I knew I'd found the place I wanted to live. I was looking for a place to live outside of Australia, trying to escape from the massive overregulation and decreasing our rights.
I think we may have lost you, Paul.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you. All right, you're
Great,
back.
Yeah, okay. And yeah, it's been a great journey ever since, just learning about how an autonomous government system works. That the people here themselves, most of them don't even know the word anarchy, but it's interesting that their model has just naturally and organically moved into a very much an anarchist direction. So I'm planning to base myself here for a number of years working on projects here. So this is all very interesting to me.
Yeah, a couple of the things that Paul actually brought a couple of the members of the council down to Acapulco, the last community summit we had, and we got a presentation on kind of the struggle that Tehran went through. And let me tell you, these people are incredibly inspiring in the kind of the hardship that they endured. But man, I'm telling you, they stuck together as a community, and it really is an inspiration to see how people can come together and work together and endure a great deal of hardship, and they have done it. And that alone is something awesome. But also the way that they govern, you want to just talk a little bit about that? Because one of the things that I think is really unique is that they don't actually write down the rules. They just kind of verbally agree on them. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah,